This episode contains stories of medical procedures for intersex people.
The Quilt.
Living memories of queer Britain and Northern Ireland. With me, Tash Walker.
And me, Adam Smith.
Hello, Adam.
Hello, Tash. You know what? Despite all the work that we've done together, Tash, I reckon there's loads of stories we haven't captured.
There's got to be, from all the different places.
Yeah. And now is the time because queer people, more than ever, are recognising the power of their experiences and their memory.
I want to hear them, Adam.
Yes.
You know what, Adam?
What?
We've got to do it. We've got to travel around the UK.
Yes.
Let's get gathering. The stories, the histories, the herstories.
Their stories. Okay, I'm ready.
Let's go.
This is an audio archive for the future.
Are you ready for a history lesson, Adam?
Yes. Well, since I didn't do GCSE history, I'd better be.
God, okay, yeah, you've got it. The energy, it's what we need. Okay, I'm taking you to Northern Ireland.
Brilliant, okay.
So this episode is going to be a deep dive into its history. It's a place that often gets forgotten, and as one of my contributors told me, it's like the forgotten child of divorced parents.
Yeah, I guess it's because like so much of Northern Ireland's history is seen through the lens of the Troubles and the civil conflict, especially for people like us living in England.
Yeah, exactly. And underneath all of that, there are so many stories of people who were or felt themselves to be hidden, which is why I've called this episode The Hidden.
Oh, okay, sounds intriguing. Like all the best histories.
Exactly, yes. And I learnt so much whilst I was in Belfast, specifically from someone who knows it best, a historian called Michael Lawrence.
I'm Michael. I'm 26 years old. I go by he, him pronouns, and I'm a gay man. At the minute, I'm a PhD researcher in Queen's University, Belfast. I work on my thesis, Queer Fellows Abroad, Homosexuality in the Irish Diaspora from 1880 to 1960.
I started by asking Michael what drew him to queer history.
Honestly, I think I kind of got drawn to queer history in the same way that a lot of young queer people get drawn to history, that sort of ancestral urge, like that that kind of urge to find other people like you in history. Well, I was a ceasefire baby, or a peace baby, meaning I was born around the time of the Good Friday Agreement. So I was kind of born into Northern Ireland at a time where it was just about settling down, and people had a bit more freedom to express themselves, I suppose. There was this kind of undercurrent of needing a return to normality. One of the things I remember is how not only were there no kind of gay people to identify with, there was this kind of willful ignorance of gay people, this desire to pretend that they just did not exist. I remember shortly after I came out, my mother, who is a very wonderful, very accepting woman, she said to me that she just didn't understand what is happening now because there were no gay people back when she was my age. Which again, it inspired me to look backwards and to prove her wrong. I always operate based on spite, I suppose.
What years is your mum talking about then? Like the 60s, 70s?
So this would have been around the late 70s and 80s that she would have been my age.
No gay people around then?
There were none.
No.
No. Well, Lady Gaga hadn't been invented yet, so they simply it's unthinkable. I genuinely think in Northern Irish culture at that time and place, it was an in one ear and out the other kind of thing. There's a strong proponent in Northern Irish culture of you don't see what you're not supposed to see. You mind your own business. Obviously linked to our history of being a site of civil conflict.
Oh, I have to say I'd never thought of that before. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
That if you live during a conflict or even in the shadow of one as it recedes, even queerness can get swept under the rug in the service of peace.
Yeah, totally. The interconnecting nature of it all. I think it's so fascinating. So I asked Michael to take me that step further back in time and share with me some of the hidden history he's been uncovering.
Yeah, well, my work largely starts in the late Victorian period, which is often regarded by many historians to be the part of history where the modern homosexual emerges. So the image of the homosexual as related to Oscar Wilde and the dandy and the sort of medical homosexual and all of these weird characters that emerge at the turn of the century to try and understand homosexuality. And a lot of those kind of events that cause the emergence of that character happen in Ireland. So I'm thinking of the 1884 Dublin Castle scandal, the 1895 Oscar Wilde trials, the stealing of the Irish crown jewels, the 1916 arrest and execution of Roger Casement. All of these events happen in Ireland. Now, this is an Ireland before partition. They happen in Ireland both north and south and reflect a broader Irish culture that doesn't reflect what we see as Irish culture today, which is split between Ulster Unionism and Ulster Republicanism and Southern nationalism. So my work kind of deals with a time where Ireland was one being with several different regional identities and regional quirks, but it is Irish nonetheless. One of the things that I've been finding out is a strange sense of tolerance towards homosexuality in Ireland in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Of course, this is conditional tolerance. This is what some people writing in the early 20th century might have termed slum tolerance, being that when you are poor and you are hungry and you need money and you need food, the last thing you are going to care about is whether or not your son is sleeping around with men. In fact, that's probably better. You don't have to worry about a pregnancy, in which case. And so this is a kind of thesis that's been proposed by some other historians, notably Helen Smith in her work into homosexuality in industrial England in the early 20th century. But one of the things that I've found is that and it did happen that men would get in trouble with the law for their same-sex relations. When it did happen, more often than not, there was a reintegration into Irish society afterwards, and there was ongoing familial support. Not always, of course. Some people had religious reasons to disdain homosexuality. Some people had class reasons. Middle-class people did not particularly tolerate homosexuality. They had a public image to maintain. And there were just personal inclinations. But an image of the Irish past is often seen as being conservative, deeply religious and deeply Catholic. But in reality, that may not be the kind of image that rings true when you actually look at the case files and the prison records.
Can you tell me the story of someone that you found maybe in the records that you've been looking at?
Yeah, of course. Well, one case that I think is particularly interesting would be a young man from Cork. His name is James Barrett. And in around 1911 and 1912, he leaves his job as a quote-unquote town labourer, which is essentially someone who does odd jobs around his town, and he joins the army. While in the army, he's stationed in Kildare, and he meets another young man, a Scottish soldier. And the two of them work together as drivers, when one day they essentially go AWOL and they're missing from the post, and so people go to look for them. And they indeed do find them, and they find them in a field with their trousers down, having it off with one another.
What a scene.
What a scene. Made even better by the fact it was in the midst of a thunderstorm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Really makes you proud to be Irish. One of the newspapers, perhaps exaggerating, says that they were found by the flashes of lightning that illuminated their bodies in the field.
Oh my God, I love that.
Which I found quite sensual. I was like, I would have been twirling my hair reading that. Sounds almost romantic. Unfortunately, the fact of the case is what they were doing was illegal, and both of them end up going to prison. James Barrett goes to prison for 3 years in Dublin. His lover, he ends up going to prison, but seems to be relocated to a Scottish prison shortly after. James Barrett serves his time relatively well behaved, but one of the things that I've noticed when I looked at his prison records is the letters that he received. And when you trace them back to see where they're coming from his family. And the letters are stuff like postcards at Christmas. They're letters from his brother telling him, keeping him updated with the family. And even further afield, they're letters from a family of Barrett's in Boston. So you see this ongoing kind of family support.
Oh, and an awareness, obviously, of why he was imprisoned and the continued support.
It's a good question. Were they aware of why he was in prison? There's a sort of an Irish slang phrase, and it's just, he's in trouble. That means he's in prison. And you don't ask why someone's in prison. In fact, Oscar Wilde has a quote about this, where I'm paraphrasing here, but he says that the poor, unlike the rich, will refer to someone in prison as simply as someone who is in trouble. And he says that that's a phrase that has the perfect wisdom of love in it, because it is a phrase that comes from sympathy above all else. I think that's important, especially in a nation which is under a colonial police service, where you just have sympathy with people who are in trouble. So it's a good question as to whether his immediate family would have known, I would say. His family in Ireland, they could have read the newspaper and found out. His family in Boston, maybe, but maybe they didn't ask. As I said earlier, you don't see what you're not meant to see. One of the interesting things about James Barrett's case, and one of the things that I think really hammers home this tolerance and love of the family support, is that he originally asks the prison that he wants to be let out of prison, not in Ireland, but in Port Glasgow, which is just outside of his former lover's hometown. So maybe he was trying to forge a reunion, maybe not, it's impossible to know. But he actually decides last minute, just a week before his release, that he would rather stay in Ireland, and he moves back in with his family. Although there is evidence to indicate, and with dealing with working class histories, it's impossible to know for sure. The records are muddy, but it seems that he may have actually left Ireland shortly afterwards for Boston and lived with his family in Boston after that. So this is one of the stories that I think illustrate that, yes, there was a given amount of struggle to be queer in Belfast, especially in around time of the First World War, where James Barrett was arrested, but there was also family support. And also, there is a degree to which I think same-sex relations can be excused in youth.
Okay, what makes you think that?
Well, there's another case, in fact, in Belfast, with two men called Archibald Black and Alfred Shaw. These two men met on a place called Cooper Way, which is just between the Falls Road and the Shankill, so between a Catholic area and a Protestant area. And they essentially cruised each other on the street. One of them offered the other a bottle of whiskey, and the two of them ended up retiring to a field. Irish people love having sex in fields. It's really one of our national pastimes. And they ended
especially under thunderstorms.
Under thunderstorms. I couldn't find the weather report for this night, but I assure you there was some sort of drizzly weather in Belfast. So they end up sharing a bottle of whiskey and eventually, again, having it off with one another, where they were discovered by a night watchman. They were found by the police shortly after, and they were both arrested. But after their prison lives, I think you see a bit more of this sense of conditional tolerance. Alfred Shaw leaves Ireland. He goes to London. He joins the army there. And he lives there for a good time, somewhere up to a decade. That's what we can say. And then he actually comes back to Belfast. And he gets married and has a child, and he settles down. And I think that may indicate that it's part of his life cycle. A same-sex relation in his youth did not preclude him from becoming a quote-unquote respectable citizen in Belfast.
What time period is this again?
This was 1891 that this happened. So this is very, very early, one of the kind of earliest records of the policing of same-sex relations that we have in Northern Ireland, under what you would call the gross indecency law.
Well, these stories are classics of the genre, aren't they? men cruising each other and having sex in public and getting caught.
Yeah, it's such a common feature in gay history. Plus, the thunderstorm.
Gay.
The drama of it all.
You know, and well, plenty of people romanticize about, I think, these histories, you know, these hidden histories of men having sex in public. And I think it is great that you called this episode The Hidden, because although gays copping off in public and getting arrested is a big part of gay history, you're making me think whether, as we get further away from those times, those lightning powerful stories are going to be more and more hidden, actually, or even forgotten.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, especially as maybe more modern living histories of queer life are recorded.
Yeah.
And it made me also think about how it made Michael feel as a 26-year-old gay man living in Northern Ireland to look back at these records.
In a way, it's confusing. Because, again, as I mentioned, I started off as a queer historian with this ancestral impulse to find people who were like me, to try and take out some of that sting of not having the representation and people to compare myself to, and that kind of confusion of when people like my mother and several other kind of older people say, well, there were no gay people back in my day. So when I started looking into the records all those many years ago, I did so to try and find people like me, and I inadvertently ended up proving them right. There were no people like me in history. There were no people like anyone in history. These are people in their own right, with their own ways of understanding their same-sex desires. They aren't gay. They aren't homosexual. Jury's out on even if they're queer. They are just fascinating individuals whose sexual desires put them at odds with society. But also not in the way that we may understand it today. Clearly, they still had a lot of support from family members who had bigger things to worry about than whether or not someone was having it off with another man or another woman.
Tash, I want to ask you what you made of Michael's point there.
Yeah, I think Michael makes such an important point. When we look back in history through the lens of ourselves today, especially as queer people today who claim those labels, you know, who use those very readily, we have to be mindful of the context, the historical context. We have to be careful to not then retrospectively put them on someone who never put those labels on themselves, let alone would they even understand the definitions of many of these labels that we use today, especially when it comes to sexuality and gender identity.
Yeah, I think it's a really deep point because it shows that homosexuality is just made up and heterosexuality is just made up and everything else. You know, humans have the capacity for different sexual desires and practices. It's a big fluid mess.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll clean it up. I might say that I am gay or queer, right? But really that's just how I feel in relation to the world that I find myself in and the time that I find myself in. So those words are useful to me, but they are not me.
Right, yeah.
You see what I mean?
Totally, and I completely agree with it. It's like the labels that save us also constrain us. And yeah, like you, Adam, I was really intrigued by this point. So I asked Michael why he was so fascinated with these histories and whether he thought we could claim them as ours.
At the end of the day, when we boil it down to its bare essentials, we know that either because of their same-sex desires or their gender transgressions, they felt at odds with society, as many queer people do today. And as for these histories have been hidden, a good question to ask is who has been hiding them, because often we reach an ethical quandary when we find out that it was the people themselves who hid this history. And that brings us to another question of, are we right to reclaim this history, to try and drag these people to light when they may have simply wanted to be forgotten?
Okay, this is such an interesting debate, what Michael has raised. You know, personally, I do have a lot of time for the other view, which is that it is ethical for historians to bring stories out into the light when society has changed, rather than leave them in the dustbin of history.
Yeah, this is something that I think about so much. I know we think about it a lot. And what Michael is saying, you know, how we are different to the people who came before us, but there is a connection. And that connection is same-sex desire or an aligned understanding of gender identity. But it is also a connection made from being othered by society.
Yeah, it's complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, and I asked Michael to give me a bit more modern day context.
Homosexuality was partially decriminalised in 1982 in Northern Ireland, and this came after a very long struggle to get the 1967 Sexual Offences Act to be applied to Northern Ireland. The struggle started kind of in earnest in 1974 through the work of three organisations, and that would be the 1974 Committee, a group of lawyers and students who tried to go through the quote-unquote right channels to do so, going through the courts, petitioning the government. Alongside that was the Northern Irish Gay Rights Association, or NAGRA, who would protest and print leaflets and flyers in newspapers to try and educate the public on homosexuality, as well as causing a nuisance to the people who need to be nuisanced. And then on top of that, there was Cara-Friend. And Cara-Friend was more of an individual support organisation for queer people in Northern Ireland. They would receive letters and phone calls from people who were struggling with their identity or struggling with the law. And it's worth mentioning that these three organisations were very close to each other. They shared members and they shared goals and they cooperated very closely. So one of the leaders of these groups, Jeffrey Dudgeon, eventually managed to take the case of applying or decriminalising homosexuality or same-sex relations between men to the European Court of Human Rights. He did something which was very clever, very interesting, where he applied his homosexuality as a fact of the case. He said that it was an intrinsic part of his essence. He couldn't change it, and therefore the European Court of Human Rights, under Articles 8 and 14, had to respect that. And it worked. And in 1982, homosexuality was decriminalised in Northern Ireland.
Wow. That's quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. It's one of the many things that, if I climb on my soapbox now, I would say that Belfast is often ignored in queer histories of Britain and queer histories of Ireland. We're seen as the troublemaker, but more often we're seen as the backwater. People remember Sea of Ulster from Sodomy, led by Reverend Ian Paisley, where he kind of viciously attacked the efforts of decriminalisation. They don't remember that it was decriminalised, though, that eventually the gay rights organisations won. And they remember the kind of vocal opposition to gay rights and same-sex marriage of the DUP in the 2000s and 2010s. But they don't really remember that it was won. And I think Belfast is often forgotten about in kind of wider queer histories of Britain and Ireland. Whereas in reality, we were often at the centre of the struggles. And we're often at the centre of the history writing. Belfast has some of the most fantastic archives on queer history that often go unused. We also had one of the first queer historians with Hartford Montgomery Hyde.
Michael speaks so eloquently about this point, and it's true, isn't it? And I can only hope that him sharing these stories and thoughts in the Quilt will make more people aware of Ireland and Northern Ireland's queer history.
Yeah, totally. And we heard Michael mention the organisation Cara-Friend.
Yeah.
This really sparked my interest. An organisation that has been campaigning, yes, but also supporting people through letters and phone calls since 1974. So I asked him to tell me more.
I was very fortunate that as part of my PhD, I was allowed to do an internship, and I chose to do it at Cara-Friend. And so eventually I reached out to Adam Murray at Cara-Friend, who is their community development manager. And I asked if he would mind if I did an internship with him. And so I came into the office and I essentially was immediately handed a huge stack of letters to transcribe. I almost wonder if that was like a hazing kind of thing. It's like, oh, well, we have a historian now, get to transcribing.
Where did these letters come from?
These letters were written to Cara-Friend from the 1970s through to the early 2000s by people looking for support in Northern Ireland.
Well, this sounds very familiar, Tash, to us. It sounds like the logbooks.
I know. I was thinking that too. If you didn't know, we made an earlier podcast called the logbooks, using the archive of Switchboard, the LGBTQ+ helpline, which queer people called when they needed support. Anyway, it started in 1974.
You're like advertising it all over again.
I know.
Well, I'm sure that meant that you were just really into the stories from Cara-Friend, right?
Yeah, Adam, you know me so well. I'm a one-trick pony. But I knew I just had to find out more. So I headed to Cara-Friend's offices in Belfast to find Adam Murray and hear more about this amazing organisation coming up to its 50th birthday. So I'm in the Cathedral Quarter of Belfast, which is home to the LGBT centre here, which is home to Cara-Friend. And I can see Adam. This is perfect timing. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, thanks. Welcome.
Thanks. Okay, let's go. So this is
the Belfast LGBT Centre. So for several years now, Cara-Friend, the Rainbow Project, and Here and I have all rented private premises together.
Okay.
And just called it the LGBT Centre, basically. But we're all here, basically.
great.
Yeah.
Well, let's go in.
Sure. The elevator's not working, so we'll have to take the stairs.
Okay, that's fine.
This building's not ideal. It's sort of falling apart on us.
How long have you been here?
So we've been here about 7 or 8 years. I'll tell you exactly when. Since 2017, when the previous rented building we used to work out of was bought to turn into a hotel, and they asked us to leave. So we've been here since 2017. It's not ideal, but we are actually getting a lot of support from Belfast City Council and
Because we've got the Rainbow Project and...
yeah, so
Here
Rainbow
and I.
Project's offices are here and down there, and Here and I are in this part of the building here.
So what's Here and I?
So they support lesbian and bisexual women and their families.
Okay.
And the Rainbow Project, they would do like a lot of counselling, a lot of health policy,
Okay.
variety of things.
And then I can see Cara-Friend.
Yep, and this is us. My name's Adam Murray. I'm the Community Development Manager here at Cara-Friend. I use he, him pronouns. My journey with Cara-Friend started about 16, 17 years ago as a service user, and I offered to volunteer. They said they had enough youth worker volunteers, so they sort of went, well, we could put you in the office to assist with the boss. And that then led to, after volunteering for about half a year, I got 10 hours a week admin, and then 20 hours, and then 35 hours, and then eventually moved over to community work, and then eventually became a manager. I joined the youth group as a pretty unhappy, recently out LGBT person. The first good while that I came to the youth group, I would just sit in the corner and not really talk to anyone. I would just be here. But I quickly, warmed to Cara-Friend and made friends here. Friendships that some of them continue today, 15, 16, 17 years later. I would put it down as like one of the most fundamental parts of my identity and who I am as a person. Cara-Friend's really helped shape me in a lot of ways by offering such a variety of support and opportunities to engage with others. So it's been very exciting, actually. It's been lovely to work for a community that you care about.
It sounds like as much as Adam has shaped Cara-Friend, the organisation has also shaped him, like made him who he is.
Yeah.
So that's a personal history, Tash. What about the organisation's history?
Yeah, right. Let's get into that. So I asked Adam to tell me the story of Cara-Friend.
So this is our 50th anniversary. We're set up in 1974 by students at Queen's University Belfast who were members of the Gay Liberation Society. And whilst they were very involved in like political activity, like seeking decriminalisation, for example, they also recognised that there was a need for community support. So they set up a PO box. They then, a year or two later, set up a helpline. From the 70s onwards, a big part of what they were doing was providing information, providing a listening ear, and doing befriending. And so in a lot of ways, they laid down the foundations of what is the modern LGBTQI plus community in Northern Ireland.
Can you tell me why Cara-Friend is called Cara-Friend?
Cara-Friend was named because Cara is the Irish for friend. So it was to show that in 1970s, a really difficult period in the Troubles here, it was to show that they were a cross-community organisation for both sides of the orange-green divide, as it would be termed.
Wow, it's so powerful, isn't it? That LGBTQ plus organisation, in its very naming, is about solidarity. And well, conflict resolution, right?
Yeah,
like bringing
totally.
people together with that inference, that texture of the Troubles.
Yeah, it is. And I asked Adam whether there was any mention of the Troubles in the calls and the letters that they answered.
I mean, surprisingly, no. The Troubles does not really jump off the page at you. People are really just... Isolation jumps off the page at you. Depression jumps off the page at you. Seeking friendship, just seeking companionship. Those are the themes that run throughout a lot of the letters. Their desire to have connection, have community, find love, and love themselves, ultimately. One thing that strikes me whenever I look at the archive material of Cara-Friend is that right from the beginning, they weren't operating like a clandestine... I mean, in certain ways, obviously, they were protecting people's identities and things like that, but they weren't operating like a clandestine organization. They were writing to public health bodies. They were writing to psychological bodies. They were writing to the police even, and sort of saying, we're here to advocate on behalf of, gay and lesbian people. Because, again, the only thing they could really arrest you for was, like, the act itself. So there was nothing to stop them. But they still, it still led to the arrests, the raid. So they did it with some risk to themselves, personal risk.
Tash, I feel like you're teasing me. Like, I'm really intrigued by these letters in the archive at Cara-Friend.
We'll get there, Adam.
Okay,
we'll get there.
Good.
But of course, confidentiality has been key. And Adam even told me about a time that the police raided Cara-Friend in the 70s. But the volunteers in the office had been really careful to separate the letters from any personal details of who had written the letters so that no one could be identified.
Oh, God, thank God they did that.
Yeah, I know. It's quite an image, isn't it? The police
Yeah.
coming in and looking through these files, but never finding out who sent them.
Yeah.
And they carried that care for the letter writers on when they donated the letters to the Public Records Archive. The members of Cara-Friend literally sat with a scalpel and cut the names and addresses out so the writers would keep their anonymity. So, Adam, we've been talking a lot about the letters. Do you think there's any way that we could go and have a look at some?
Yeah, we're lucky that a lot of the letters are currently in the Cara-Friend office getting prepped to be added to the archive. So there's letters here, I think, from the 90s and also from the 70s and 80s. There's also all of our annual reports. So you'll see here, for example, box here we have some copies, but this is our first annual report from 1974 to 1975.
And it's like a sort of faded blue paper cover. And
like the staples are rusting into the paper.
I think the staples have disappeared into rust.
It's falling apart.
Oh my God, it's amazing. It's so old.
And you can see it's all typed. And one of the things I really love about our early annual reports is that actually they're very narrative. During the year 1974 to 75, Cara-Friend's been contacted by 301 individuals, and information on their sex, age, geographical areas, sources, and results is contained in Appendix 2. So they were really detail-oriented from the get-go.
Also 300 people in that first year.
Yeah.
And that would have been all by letter?
That first year would have been all letters. These annual reports can all be accessed via Queen's University, Belfast, because they actually digitized all of these. So if anyone's interested, they just would have to Google Cara-Friend Annual Reports, Queen's University Belfast, and they'll pretty much be able to read about 30 years of queer history right there and then for free. And we have,
you've got the letters here.
There's some letters from 94, letters personal, so there's a whole batch of letters.
So we can have a look at some
Oh,
of these.
sure. I mean, do you want to just... Let's pull out a batch. There are so many of them.
So we've got this brown envelope wrapped batch of letters. Okay.
Here's a letter from 96. So it's a Dear Helpline, I am a 19-year-old who is at this present time very confused and lonely. Since I was about 15, I've always lived with the secret that I may or be or am gay.
Wow, that line, I have always lived with the secret that I may be or am gay. It's like what you were talking about earlier about these people living hidden in plain sight.
7th of November, 1975. Dear Sir, I read with interest your advertisement in the Belfast Telegraph. I would be most grateful if you would send me on further information. This seems to be my only ray of hope, as I find it very difficult meeting gay friends. Over the past few years, I've tried dating girls, but only found it more frustrating. I seem to find myself when I'm with another boy. Please send help quickly. Forever yours.
9th of September 1975. Dear Cara-Friend, I don't know what to write here. I've seen the advert in the paper many times. I've wrote many times, but never sent the letter. What can I tell you? I'm 21, I'm a homosexual, and I'm lonely. Very lonely sometimes. Doesn't seem much I can do about that. I'm an ordinary, working class girl. I find it hard to confide in anyone. I couldn't tell my parents, they'd never understand. I was in prison for 2 years. Maybe that will put you off. But prison didn't make me a homosexual. When I was 15, I told a teacher how I felt. She said it was a phase. Some phase. Well, I think I'll send this letter this time. Things couldn't get worse. Maybe you'll help me meet others like myself, who I don't have to pretend with. I've expressed myself badly, never was any good at writing letters. Yours hopefully.
10th of June, 1997. Dear Sir, Madam, I am wondering if you could help me. I am a lesbian, and I was hoping that you could help me find someone because I don't know how I would go about it. I don't want to phone because I wouldn't know what to say. So if you could tell her to meet me on a Friday at 5:45 p.m. outside Marks and Spencer's in town if she could, I would be very grateful if you could help me. Yours sincerely.
Dear Sirs, would you have in stock dildo, code 21268, strap on? I got one from you one time before. So if you have one in stock, let me know the price and I will send on the money. Yours faithfully.
22nd of April, 1998. Dear David, you may recall that I wrote to you just before Xmas and you replied on 18th December. Thank you very much for reaching out your hand in friendship. The past 6 months have been very difficult for me, and it is always good to know that there is an opening somewhere. Just after Xmas, a friend of my sister asked me if I wanted him to show me the scene in Belfast. Since then, I have been out a number of times, and I suppose this has improved my confidence vis-a-vis my sexuality. That's not to say I've overindulged, of course, but I have made some friends and feel that I can be myself at last. Anyways, I just wanted to say thank you again for your support and to let you know that some stories have happy endings.
Wow, these letters are incredible.
Aren't they?
Yeah, like you really get a sense of people's lives and, well, their concerns and their needs. It's like the work that we did with the logbooks. You can hear their loneliness, their isolation, people reaching out for other people, like whether it's to meet me at the high street or supply me with a dildo.
Everyone needs a dildo, Adam.
Well, not everyone wants one.
Also, this is at a time when society was trying to deny so many of these people's existence, hide their lives.
Yeah.
But as you hear from the letters, they wanted to burst out.
Yeah.
And Cara-Friend was there for them. You know, with each letter I read, I really felt that I wasn't the first person to read these letters. Cara-Friend had, and more than that, they'd replied.
Is Cara-Friend still going?
Yeah, it is, and still needed, actually. I asked Adam to tell me more about the work that Cara-Friend does today.
There's a whole network that we support of either LGBTQIA plus youth services that we provide or local community-run youth services that we support that choose to be part of our inclusive youth network. So I think there must be over a dozen now, which is just wonderful, you know, and there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young people moving through the service at any given time, and they're not all like university age. Most of them are in those really important formative early teenage years. So as well as the youth work, a big part of our work today is in schools. I'm grateful that we're able to be as open as we are here when so many people aren't. When you talk about the hidden, I think about the global struggle.
And where you were, and where Northern Ireland was historically, you're not anymore.
No, we're not. We're here. We're queer. Get used to it.
Thanks, Adam. You okay?
Yeah.
We're here and we're queer. Damn right.
We are.
Yes. But also, like, what a ride.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing about doing queer history, as Adam is kind of implying there, which is, it is, well, saying really, it's not history to a lot of people. Like, especially in other places, they're still writing letters like the ones that we've heard.
Yeah, that's so true. But this really does feel like a historical tour of Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
We started in the 1800s with Michael, then we flew to the 70s with Adam.
Yeah, I've learned so much.
Yeah, me too. Well, I have one more story for you.
Okay.
It's a really personal one. I want to introduce you to someone called Hannah, whose understanding of herself happened much later in life. Hannah is an intersex lesbian woman, but this isn't something she learnt until she was in her 50s.
My name is Hannah. I'm 73 years old, and I was born in Northern Ireland. Not realising it at the time, only much later, I discovered that I was born intersex. And it has caused me lots of problems, but I hopefully have adapted to them. I identify nowadays as an intersex female. I was assigned male at birth. I have lived as a girl. I've lived as a boy. I failed as a man, and I'm very happy now living as a lesbian woman.
You've got a big smile on your face when you say that.
Yes.
Can you tell me when you first realised or found out that you were intersex?
It actually came by accident as such, because I was having health problems and I was putting testosterone, because at that stage the doctor told me when he did my endocrine levels that my testosterone was in single figures. I had the testosterone levels of an 80-plus-year-old man and elevated estrogen levels. So I was immediately, without referral to any other specialist, put on testosterone. And it was only much later when the testosterone itself started to cause problems and wasn't really being effective. So I stopped it. And within a few weeks, I actually went into female puberty. I had partial androgen sensitivity syndrome. Partial, in my case, meaning that some parts of my body reacted to testosterone, some didn't. There is full androgen sensitivity syndrome where people are actually born who don't react at all. Not only do you need the hormone in your body, but there are receptors within the body that react to those hormones. If those receptors aren't receptive to testosterone, you will not virilize as a male. In my case, little bits did respond, other bits didn't. But even though when my testosterone was through the roof, I should have been like Arnie. Instead, here I was, straight up and down. I spent a year and a half trying to bulk up at the gym. And in the end, the gym owner says, "Oh, give it up. There's no way your body's ever going to adapt." So, no, it's something that's been throughout my life. But that in itself helped me, because when they first said about putting me on testosterone, I believed, oh, this is great. This is why I've had all these problems throughout my life. This is going to resolve it. It didn't, in fact. But as time went on, it did highlight the fact that I had been born intersex, and I have a number of intersex conditions. In fact, the term intersex is a collective term for 40-plus variations in sexual characteristics. The percentage of people that have one or more of those 40-plus is 1.7%. Now, that's just a figure, but that's as common as people with red hair in the population. So we have lots of people, the vast bulk of them either don't know or they don't wish anyone else to know that they were born intersex. In fact, I was in my late 50s before I discovered that I had any intersex characteristics at all.
Gosh, Tash, it sounds like Hannah was really open with you.
Yeah, she was. And it's a very sensitive subject, like she said. So we had preliminary conversations and emails.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to make sure that Hannah was comfortable sharing whatever she wanted to.
Yeah, and it's so important that she did, because as she says, that intersex conditions are really common. Like they're as common as red hair.
Yeah.
But it still mostly remains hidden. I am curious to hear more of Hannah's story. Have you got more?
Yeah, Hannah actually grew up being told and thinking that she'd had this groundbreaking surgery performed on her for her cleft palate and cleft lip. But it wasn't until she was in her 50s, when she was researching everything, that she realised this groundbreaking surgery was actually in relation to her being intersex.
Okay.
It was the early 1950s and these types of surgeries had just started being performed. So she had the surgery in September 1953 when she was only a baby. And as part of this surgery, they operated on Hannah's genitalia.
Because of the variations I had, I was born with ambiguous genitalia, which simply means I had both a urethra and vagina and a small penis. But what happened is that I urinated the same way as I do now as a woman. The urethra came out into the lips of my urethra, but it was redirected and put in, and they also sealed up those lips to form a scrotum. But up until that time, I sat down to pee the same as every other little girl. All my friends were girls. And in fact, one of the funny things is I was christened Joseph, and Audrey, one of my friends, used to come to the door, knock the door and say, "Oh, is Jesus, Mary and Joseph in?" We were only about 2.5, maybe 3. And she knew it was one of those 3, but she wasn't sure which one it was. Unfortunately, it led to bullying in the playground, because what was discovered is I was still wearing female underwear. It meant quite often in the playground the boys would pull my little shorts or kilt up and pull my underwear down, and people would laugh, etc. That stayed with me for quite some time. I also was told, now unfortunately Mummy was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 9-year-old, but in around that time she had said, "Oh, you're very small. If you don't start growing soon, you're going to have to start getting injections." Now, because of her illness, and basically between 9 and when she died, when I was 11, she spent the greater part of that time in hospital. Those injections never came about.
Okay, so just to check on some things here. So your mum obviously knew that you'd had the intersex surgery.
Yeah.
You didn't.
No.
And then she got ill when you were 9 and then died when you were 11.
Yes.
And so if she hadn't, do you think that you would have been taken to the hospital for those injections?
Yes, I would have got them probably monthly the way I did when I was much later in life. The other aspect as well, just as an aside, there is the situation of my birth certificate. My original birth certificate, when I was getting my gender or sex changed on my birth certificate, I got my old certificates out, my originals. And normally what happens, I was a home birth, and when you're born at home, the doctor issues a little short birth certificate at the time of the birth. And then within 6 weeks, it's officially registered in the register office. Now, when I was doing that, research, etc., and getting birth certificates, what I found out is that the little short birth certificate is dated 10 days after my original birth was fully registered. So they didn't actually write out the little birth certificate until after it had been decided what sex I was going to be registered as. For a long time, it made me very angry, but in looking back and reflecting, there are pluses and minuses. Because I was intersex and was actually androgynous, which is the term, I actually, over a 30-year period, was able to have one child, which, if I'd been assigned female, not having a womb, I've never been able to have a child. The other aspect, thinking of Mummy at the time, if she had assigned me as female, no one knew what was going to happen with the surgery for the cleft palate, but particularly the hair lip. And it's much easier for a male with a hair lip than it would be for a little girl with a hair lip. So there's possibility, she did that too. Plus, giving me the advantage of, shall we say, male benefits rather than female, particularly going back to the 50s, where females were very subservient to males in those days. I was very often mistaken as a gay male. Now, I have never, ever been gay in that sense, but at 15-year-old, I was actually beaten up in a dance. I was dancing with the other girls, and a crowd of boys, came over, called me a poofter, and started kicking me all around the place. And in fact, it was the group who pulled me up onto the stage. Goodness knows what would have happened. But because of that, the dance organizer and the group had to be, and myself had to get a police escort out of the venue that night and out of the town. One of the things that annoyed me is I'd always been read as effeminate rather than feminine. It was my natural state to be feminine, to be a female. That throughout all of my married life, we had sex problems. In hindsight, because of the physical problems I'd had, I didn't realise at that time. And the unfortunate situation is I took to alcohol. And for a long, long time, I was a problem drinker. I used it as a painkiller. I used it as an anaesthetic. Things would just get on top of me and I'd go and get blitzed. Thankfully, I'm sober now for over 30 years. I'm very happy with that too. And again, living the life I am now, I don't need any painkillers or anaesthetics because of my sex or gender.
How did it feel when you found out the reality of it, the truth of it, about being intersex?
My first reaction is I'm very angry. I'm very hurt in relation both to Mummy and to life.
Oh, she's been through so much, hasn't she?
Yeah, she really has. And I was thinking about that as I was listening to her tell me her story and just how tough it was and has been. Especially because a lot of people, including doctors, they just don't understand intersex conditions and how to best take care of the patient.
Yeah. So how did Hannah finally become herself then? Yeah,
well, to summarise, for various reasons to do with her own body and medical interventions, she became female. So then she went to the registrar to correct her birth certificate, which said male.
Makes sense.
But they'd only change the birth certificate if there'd been a mistake. And since she was intersex, either male or female on the birth certificate wasn't classed as a mistake.
What? Even though it clearly was?
I know. So she was only going to be able to change her birth certificate if she also had some surgery to affirm her female body. And in that way, the system would treat her as a transgender person.
Okay.
And then she could be seen properly by the system.
Oh, it's so complicated. And it must have been such a confusing period for her. Really difficult.
I know. But here's how Hannah remembered that moment of coming round after her surgery.
I came around in recovery and looked at the clock, and it was just over 90 minutes from I'd walked from my room to anaesthesia, been anaesthetised, transferred in, had surgery, drains fitted, dressings, etc. So really quick, so I burst into tears and said to the nurse in the room, "Why did you stop my surgery?" He said, "Oh, why do you ask that?" I says, "I was in the OR for 61 minutes. They obviously stopped the surgery. I was told it was 2.5 hours." I go, "Oh, no. Everything's complete. Everything's fine." So the tears gradually dried up. So I actually came back. I was told I'd have a maximum vaginal depth of 3 inches. And because I was lesbian, they weren't going to go in and take bowel tissue or anything to increase the depth. But when I came back from my 12-week review, what we found out was that I had over 5 inches depth. Because what had happened is the tissue they'd used had stretched into the full size of my blind vagina that I'd been born with since a child. So to all intents and purposes, the surgery was a great success. And I'm very, very happy now.
There's a mirroring, isn't there, of what happened to you when you were a child and what happened to you as an adult?
Yeah, indeed, very, very much so. And as I say, choices were made. The advantage for me was that I was then able to choose. As a baby, I had no voice whatsoever. Someone else made the decision for me. Unfortunately, for so many intersex children, doctors, parents, or the situation of both will choose and assign a sex to that child. And unfortunately, we have a situation, particularly in the UK, where there are only 2 sexes. They do not recognise intersex. And in fact, very often, what I've had to do in the past is I've had to sign away some medical rights so that I would be considered fully female. It's very unfair for intersex people. We can't make a choice. Intersex people in general, I suspect some will die, and it's maybe only in an autopsy it will be discovered that they were born intersex. Others will be aware, but choose to live totally in secrecy in relation to it.
You're hidden.
And that's why one of the purposes of doing this interview and some others I have done is to highlight that the I in LGBTQIA is for intersex, not for invisible. So many of us are seen as not existing or automatically assuming that someone in this situation, someone myself, was transgender, rather than being intersex and having a sex or gender assigned to us that later in adult life was incorrect. So I want to bring visibility and make the I for intersex, not for invisible.
Wow, what a remarkable woman, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so great as well that she told you her story, Tash.
Yeah, I really think so. I think it's so important that stories like this don't stay hidden, so more people can know who they are earlier.
Yeah, and so that they don't have to go through what Hannah went through.
Yeah. But there was one last question I had for Hannah.
Go on.
And that was to ask when she started using the word lesbian to identify her sexuality.
The strange thing is, I remember having a conversation with my doctor. Once I had got to the situation where I had to get referred, because they will not allow self-referral to the gender identity clinic. So I had to go to the doctor and have that referral done. And again, I burst into tears speaking to her. I said, "I'm not a gay man. I'm female. I'm feminine." And the strange thing is, it was only after I said that to the doctor that I started to reflect, oh, I am gay. I'm a lesbian. I've always only identified as liking and being sexually attracted to other females. So I am gay and I am lesbian.
Talking to you now, you're just radiating. Your face is full of smiles in claiming and knowing these things about yourself.
It was so lovely not to have to hide the fact that, I'm female. So that was really lovely and really beautiful. And I enjoyed it so much. And I enjoyed living as a woman and as a lesbian so very, very much.
It's very enjoyable for me to see you enjoying your life like this.
Oh, I can hear the joy and the relief for Hannah to realise that she's a lesbian and be able to live that. It's amazing.
Yeah, you really can, can't you?
Yeah.
I loved Hannah. And she actually invited me along with her partner, Alex, to join them for Belfast Trans Pride afterwards.
Oh, amazing.
So we walked down to Cathedral Square to join in the celebrations.
So we're walking to Ryder Square for the Trans and Intersex Pride rally in Belfast.
How many years have you two been coming to this?
I think we've been coming, this is our third or fourth year.
Fourth.
Okay, here we go.
There's the Lord Mayor who's gay.
It sounds like a great pride.
Yeah, it was such a great day. Despite the intermittent rain, the energy was high and the performances were fantastic. And listen to these speeches.
In true Trans Pride fashion, I want to start with a chant, shall we? Sing along if you know this one. What do we want? Pride. When do we want it? Pride. What do we want? Pride. When do we want it? Pride. What do we want? Pride. When do we want it? Pride. There we go. Woo! These are too good. And take a good look around you. Take it in. Everyone here is here for one reason, to stand up for trans communities, trans lives, trans rights. There are countless people who aren't even here today who will also stand up for your rights. You're not alone. It might feel impossible, but together we will fight for our rights and we will win. All the love, happy Trans Pride, and up a queers!
Please put your hands together for the stunningly dressed and incredibly articulate Mal Farrow! Sorry. Hello, everybody. Look at you all braving the rain. How very good of you. I'm here today to say intersex people are wonderful. We are wonderful people. And our existence and our experience is valid within this queer community. And that to deny an intersex person of their identity is to deny them of their basic rights. We cannot continue to be silenced as lawmakers and medical professionals continue to be neglectful of the intersex community. We have to hold them accountable.
The first voice that you heard there was Alexa Moore, one of the organisers, and after that was Mal Farrell, an intersex and trans activist.
And Hannah was with you at Trans Pride, right?
Yeah.
How was it for her?
She was so happy. Maybe it was a bit like a homecoming, you know, because she's spoken there the previous year. She was the first intersex person to speak at Belfast Trans Pride.
Wow. Well, what an episode this has been, like from Michael through Adam and then Hannah, amazing patches to add to the quilt.
Yeah, and here's another one. These are some extracts from a poem by Hannah. It's called From Intersex Birth to a Full New Life, written in the voice of a little girl lost.
When I was born, questions were asked. Select a sex for me, mother was tasked. I spanned both sexes, so without a voice. A preference for boys, male, her choice. Surgeon appointed, my gender to be aligned. Mummy's choice male was silently assigned. At 18 months, general surgery performed, to our society's eyes, no longer deformed. At secondary school, things got worse. A slight frail stature, my allotted curse. Initial lack of puberty, I didn't much mind. But as I grew older, nature left me behind. With the passing of years, life took its toll, not just on my body, my psyche, my soul. My niche in society was a majority of one, so few friends, understood by none. Now free of male-injected hormones, new curves, new voice in softer tones. Once more my birthright, free to explore, as a female, as a lesbian, a life to adore. Conversion practices left my faith in doubt. Once close Christian friends, no longer about. Ghosting ministers, elders, left me in the lurch. The one saving grace, an all-inclusive church. Happiness and contentment, a path that is true. Reversing childhood surgery, long overdue. Just 60 minutes under the surgeon's knife. I'm living transformed, this new rainbow life.
I was blown away by the folks I met in Belfast. All these queer histories and stories, more patches for our growing quilt. You know, it's getting quite big now, isn't it?
Yes, it's going to be really nice and warm and cosy for the winter. And thanks for sharing all these stories, collecting them all from Belfast. It's so great. Are you ready for the next episode?
Yeah, I think I am.
Well, I'm going to take you back across the Irish Sea to Wales. The Quilt is an Aunt Nell production in partnership with Queer Britain, the UK's first and only LGBTQ+ museum, and funded by Mindsets and Missions.
It is hosted and produced by Tash Walker and Adam Smith.
Music by Rhiannon Takel. The assistant producer was Marnie Woodmead.
The associate producers for Queer Britain were Sue Shave, Sean Williams, and Catherine Dick. Mixed and mastered by David Pye. For this episode, we'd like to thank Adam Murray at Cara-Friend, Belfast Trans Pride, Gonya Stars, Here and I, Laura Graham, and the staff at Ulster Museum.
Queer Britain Museum is located in Granary Square, King's Cross in London. It's free to visit and is open from Wednesday to Sunday, 12 p.m. to 6 p.m.
If you'd like to talk to anyone about any issues raised in this podcast, you can always get in contact with Switchboard, the LGBTQIA+ helpline, on switchboard.lgbt or by calling them on 0800 0119 100.